not live, folks. Welcome to the Sit Down Standards Unaccompanied Gamer. My name's David, and in this series of videos, we're going to take a look at games that aren't just great for multiple players, but also offer a unique and exciting single-player experience. Now, with this week's series of videos, all about games that kind of have an unattractive cover or a little displeasing or difficult to introduce to people, I really can only think of one game, and that's the worker placement game Lords of Waterdeep from Wizards of the Coast. Now, it's not necessarily that I find the front of the artwork displeasing. In fact, I think it looks great. But there is one component to the front of this box that scares almost anybody I introduce or try to bring this game out to. And that is the sigil on the front, Dungeons and Dragons. Now, if you know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, it's of course a classic RPG that can take quite a bit of time creating characters. Think of things like D20s, graph paper in some instances. This is really where a lot of people think of when they think of Dungeons and Dragons, something very heavy that takes a lot of time. This game is not necessarily that. This is actually a very streamlined, simple worker placement game where you're going to be acting as one of the Lords of Waterdeep, this famous town in the Dungeons and Dragons lore. And you're going to be sending out your agents to try to recruit different adventurers to complete quests. Now, like any good worker placement game, space is limited, so it's important that you get to where you need to go because only one of your agents can sit on that particular area. What's unique about this game is that throughout the game, you're going to be adding more and more buildings or places that your agents can go to and visit. There is also some backstabbing, of course, just like any good worker placement game. You can kind of play these intrigue cards, which act as like bribing or kind of backstabbing other players, while at the same time trying to advance your different agendas and complete your quest. But going back to the front of the box, the reason why I think this game is both difficult to introduce to people and also very important to introduce to people is because of that Dungeons and Dragons logo. For me, this is really the Trojan horse game in introducing designer board games to your friends and family. The reality is if you can introduce a game that says Dungeons and Dragons on the front and people will have fun playing it, the world is your oyster. At that point, I think people start to let their guard down in seeing the Dungeons and Dragons and just designer board games in general because of the preconceived notions of what goes on in a Dungeons and Dragons game. For me, this is a very simple game. A lot of people own this game. It's a very popular game. And for me, I kind of go back to this game in a lot of ways when I want to enjoy a worker placement game. It certainly doesn't have the most advanced mechanics. There's tons of games out there that have maybe more advanced mechanics when it comes to worker placement. But this feels like going back to like watching a classic movie that you've seen a number of times or playing an old video game that you've played multiple times and beaten. It really just feels like home. So for me, this is a fantastic game that you've got to check out, especially if you're introducing people to a worker placement type of game or just designer board games in general. Now, remember, this is the Unaccompanied Gamer, so it wouldn't be that if this didn't have a single-player experience. Now, out of the box, it doesn't. It doesn't come with any single-player variant. But the great folks over at Board Game Geek have introduced a single-player or solo variant. Essentially, what this does is it creates an AI player, basically a competing second player, that will have priorities as to what they're going to do. Now, I had a chance to play this a number of times, and actually I was surprised how close it was, as well as how much fun I was having. I was expecting kind of a single-player worker placement game sometimes feel very mechanical and kind of stale. But this one I felt like, wow, they're actually, the AI player is making almost the right decision or close to the right decision. So definitely give it a try. If you already own the game, you can check it. I'll put a link actually on my Twitter. You can follow me at SitDownStandard. I'll put a link there for the solo variant, so definitely give that a try if you'd like. Until next time, bye.